Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Jason White and this is Jason's Weird Reads, and today I'm going to rank the top 10 books that I read in 2021, and I'm also going to wrap up the year a little bit. There's going to be another video or two. The next video will be the disappointing reads of 2021 because there was a fair amount. So basically what I want to do in this video is I want to wrap up my reading a little bit, talk about the year and what I'm planning to do. I'm going to go over this a little bit more in my next From the Hip video, unless something else comes up, because that happens. For this video, I just want to concentrate on the basics, just a basic wrap up and the books I enjoyed the most. There will be some time cards down there. If you want to jump around, feel free. All right, so the wrap up. I'm going to start with the wrap up. I started the year off really excited. I had all these reading plans that I was going to tackle. I had my 21 books to read in 2021, which I completely and utterly failed at, I'm sad to say. I also planned on reading all the Malazan Book of the Fallen. I was following Mike's book reviews, his reading plan. He had it set to read the Malazan Book of the Fallen all in a 2-year time span, I believe it was. And I was like, I can do it in a year. And I forgot to take into account that the Malazan Book of the Fallen is a very complex series. And for me, it's better to go much slowly. I'm still in the middle of book 4, and it's very slow going. I think it's a series I can finish, but I don't want to speed through it like I did with the Wheel of Time books. You know, it's a very much different type of series. So I completely botched my 21 books to read in 2021. And I was thinking of doing another list of 22 books to read in 2022. And I've seen a couple other people doing this, and I don't think I'm going to do it. I think, you know what I'm going to do? I think I'm going to keep my 2021 books. I have a bookshelf. It's like right here. These books here are my 21 books to read in 2021. And like I said, I didn't touch any of them, I don't think. There may be one or two that I read, but I need to... I'm just going to keep them there on that part of the shelf as a reminder. So it also wasn't a great year in terms of quality for me. I read altogether 75 books, which was a good thing, but I'll get to that in a minute. Honestly, I felt really sort of meh about a lot of the books that I read. The books on the list below here you're going to see are the books that got me the most excited. There might be one or two more that I didn't add to the list. For the most part, nothing really excited me, and honestly, there was a few books that I just kind of hate read because I really didn't enjoy what I was reading, but I continued reading them anyway, which is something I usually don't do. I usually just DNF if I'm not enjoying the book, and I honestly, I did a lot of that too this year. I don't know. I have some theories actually as to why this was, and I think personally I'm working against myself when I come up with all these ambitious things. It's not that I'm not ambitious, it's just that I need to work within the bounds of where I'm comfortable, because reading a book takes a lot of commitment and dedication, and sometimes that commitment and dedication is really hard to stick to for some people like me. I think if, I keep saying this, I hate to keep complaining about this, but if I didn't have my job where, that completely exhausts me all the time, I'd probably be able to stick to more TBRs and whatnot. But I find myself almost always in a state of exhaustion. Having said all that negative stuff, I did have a great year, for me anyways. In quantity, at the beginning of the year, I set my goal at 55 books. And then I panicked around February because it took me about 2 months to read the first Malazan book, Gardens of the Moon. And I only read like maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 other shorter books in the interim. And I was way behind. So I started to panic. And so, yeah, it's February. And this is a weird thing. It's something I never used to really panic about before. It's February and you're worrying about your end result. Honestly, I set my good read counter at 55, and I only want to accomplish that so that you feel good about something that you did. It's about conquering things rather than falling back because you're failing. And so because I panicked, I set the bar back to 50 books and I left it there even when I started getting ahead later on. And I ended up smashing that goal like completely, and I could have left the 55 books alone and I would have been fine, like more than fine, because I ended up reading 75 books altogether. And as I said, for me, that's really good. It's one of my highest years ever. I think my highest year ever was 80 books, so that's pretty good. I'm not going to complain. And you know, there is a possibility also that I'll make it to 76 books, because I am in the middle of a couple of books, although I just kind of started them. So there's only a couple of days left until New Year's. I don't think I'm going to make it. There's also the possibility that I forgot to add a book to my Goodreads list, because periodically through the year I had to go and look through books that I finished reading and make sure that I added them to my Goodreads list, because it's something I'm terrible at doing. I don't know why that is, but I just forget to update that. I used to do it religiously almost about 10 years ago. What made 2021 hard? As I said, I think there's just too many obligations and obligatory reading that set me back, because I was expecting too much out of myself, given not that reading is hard, but that life itself is hard. And sometimes reading sort of intrudes on that, especially when you have a YouTube channel and you're trying to, you know, do the best that you can. So my 2022 plans are to scale back a little bit on what I was doing, or at least on my intentions here. My intentions really shifted from making videos about the books I've read as a reaction to the books I've read, rather than my channel having to react to future books that I'm reading, if that makes any sense. I need to stick to the original plan of reading and talking about what I'm reading, the channel remaining reactionary to my reading hobby. I need to stick much more, and I've been saying this for probably a couple years now. It's something I need to really stick to. I need to stick to the mood reading, so just read whatever it is I want. Don't do any readathons or any even read-alongs necessarily, unless I'm in the mood for it. Because when I start reading books I'm not really in the mood to read, despite how awesome they might be, it really starts to kill it for me. And so I also need to stop saying yes so much to when people invite me along to do things. I'm honored, honestly, every time somebody asks me to collaborate with them, but I need to say no a little more often, especially when it comes to reading books. So readathons and even interviews I need to scale back on, and a lot, which I'm not going to completely stop interviewing. I do have Chad Lutsky coming on the show a little later on, I think in January, so stay tuned for that. All right, so now we're going to move on to the top 10 list. I've talked about these books all year long, and so I'm not going to synopsize them too much. If you can just check back throughout the year. So all these books were talked about at some point, but I can't just not yak about stuff, so I'll probably end up breaking that. All right, these are ranked. I'm going to start at number 10, and we are going to work our way down to number 1. Before I begin with this list, I just want to stress that I did keep to some rules. First of all, only one book per author, because some of these books I read multiple books from a certain author, so I picked my favorite. And also, absolutely no short story collections or anthologies. The reason why I left them out is because A, I wanted this to be just novels and novellas, and B, I've got my wheels cranking about doing some short story work in the future, and I just wanted to save it for that. And also, no nonfiction books that I read. I've read a few, more than a few nonfiction books this year as well, so I kept them out of this list. So this list is purely novels and novellas. Before I get into any of that, I think that if you have been watching my channel, you might be able to guess some of these. I don't know. We'll see, I guess. Tell me down below in the comments if you're able to guess my #1 book of the year. Okay, in at number 10, I have The Hungry Earth by Nicholas Kaufman. I read this in preparation for an interview with Nicholas Kaufman. And that interview, well, first of all, the book itself, The Hungry Earth, was a lot of fun to read. I was starting to feel a little bit blah about reading books that I don't have to read, but this book really kind of pulled me out of that trench, and I had a lot of fun reading it. And that's the reason why it makes this list. There's a lot of really interesting things going on in this book. There's a lot of science and a lot of fungi. I find fungus a really interesting organism, and reading about it, because Nicholas Kaufman does not hold back in his information with fungus, and he tells you a lot of really interesting things in this piece of fiction. Talking to Nicholas Kaufman was also the second highlight of reading this book, because he is a genuine person. You feel comfortable talking to him, especially when you're a guy like me who doesn't always feel comfortable talking with others. He really sets you at ease, and he makes you feel as though you belong talking with him. And I absolutely adored my conversation with him, and I hope it's not the last. Number 9 is Before He Wakes by Mark Allen Gunnels. This, I would say, is Mark Allen Gunnels' strongest book to date. It's more of a thriller than a horror book, but it has a lot going on in it. There's a lot of tension in this book that really kept me on the edge of my seat, and that's not something I've really experienced reading Mark Allen Gunnels before. I highly recommend this book. I would honestly recommend starting, if you've never read Mark Allen Gunnels before, I would say either start with his short stories or start with this book, Before He Awakes, because this book is very solid thriller in my opinion, and I don't read too many thrillers though, so maybe I'm off my mark. And Mark Allen Gunnels is a bit of a friend, so maybe that's he's not a close friend. We chat every so often here and there on Messenger, but nothing extensive. So maybe I was a little bit biased, but I really enjoyed my time. It's a kidnapping story too, so if you enjoy serial killer kidnapping, this is probably right up your alley. In at number 8, I have We Sold Our Souls by Grady Hendrix. This was my first time reading Grady Hendrix, despite me wanting to have read him quite a bit over the last 2 or 3 years. And I'm glad I started with this one, because this one is totally about heavy metal. I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. There's a book, Heart-Shaped Box by Joe Hill, that talks a lot about death rock and death metal. And it's AC/DC. Nothing against AC/DC. I love AC/DC, but this book, We Sold Our Souls, when it says it's metal, it's actually metal. It talks about bands that a lot of casual heavy metal fans probably have never heard of, but I really appreciated. The story itself is a lot of fun too. It's about a rock star who betrayed the members of his band to get more famous by selling their souls to the devil in order to make him more famous. And when the jube starts running out, he's doing some terrible things to his former bandmates, and they're basically just wanting something back in return, mainly their souls and maybe a little bit of what he cut them out of. I've read some rock biopics, and this puts a supernatural spin on the evil shit that some people have done in music bands when they start getting famous. And so it was a lot of fun to read. In at number 7, I have Crota by Owl Going Back. This one was a spontaneous read for me. It was on my Scribd account, and I decided to give it a go. We were going on vacation, we were going camping. It's like in August, it was hot outside, had the air conditioning going, and I had myself, instead of throwing it on over the speakers, I just had my cell phone in the car door, and I started playing it, and I listened to about an hour and a half of it on the way to our campsite, and I was blown away. There's nothing extra special going on in this book. Nothing intellectual to blow me away. What blew me away was just how much it took me back to the 1980s creature feature horror films that I used to love and still do love so much. It was just a lot of fun to read. It's got a creature in it, small town America, and it's very gory. I wasn't surprised necessarily at how gory it was, but still, some of the creative things that Owl Going Back was able to do was it was a lot of fun, and I highly recommend it for that alone. If you're looking for a summertime read that's gory, creature feature, I think you need to check out this book. It's a blast. At number 6, I have Crossroads by Laurel Hightower. This is a book that I also read at around the same time as Crota. And this one I was kind of afraid of this book because it's about a mother losing her child and how she deals with it. I had heard that it's quite depressing, and it certainly is, but it didn't destroy me in the way that I feared it would. It, in fact, just captured my imagination and my emotions, but it didn't, like I said, it didn't destroy me in that terrible way I was afraid it would. Being a parent, you're just in constant fear of losing your child. Something I don't ever want to go through. And this book really encapsulates that. I highly recommend it, though. It's a moving story, but it's got a supernatural edge to it that was a lot of fun, despite all the grimness. And there is maybe even a little bit of a love story in there as well. In at number 5, I have The Nothing That Is by Kyle Winkler. This was I read for in preparation to interview Kyle Winkler, and I actually invited him to come on the show because I saw him on Nikki's channel from Dark Between Pages. She was interviewing him, and they were talking about this book. And it captured my interest because, well, the whole cosmic horror angle, I was really itching to read some cosmic horror. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to read this book and ask him to be on the show. And that's exactly what I did. At the same time, I maybe should have waited, because what if I didn't like the book, right? But and it would be the only book I've had read from him. So that wouldn't have made it a very good interview. But thankfully, I really enjoyed the book. I mean, it made my number 5 here. So it is about a guy who works in the food industry, their catering business, and this one guy, a new customer, approaches our protagonist, and he's a part of an extreme eating club, and they're looking for a snake to eat, a certain type of snake. This little bit of story leads into some very, very strange areas, especially like the dining area and the ending. And you know what? The book starts off with a graveyard in Seattle. I think it's in Seattle, exploding. So that's like in the very first paragraph. It's something that will capture your attention right away and keep it all the way until its very odd and strange ending. Highly recommend it. It's very good cosmic horror. In at number 4, I have Slow Burn on Riverside by Chad Lutzke. This was a book that I got to talk to Chad Lutzke about, which was a really special treat for me, because the first book that I read by Chad Lutzke was the first book in this sort of slight series. They're only connected in the main character, I believe it is, but the first book is Same Deep Water as You, which I read in 2018, I think it was. And this is sort of like a prequel to that book. It has very much the same feeling. I mean, I fell in love with Chad Lutzke's writing in Same Deep Water. And as I just said, this book has a lot of the same sort of feelings and social situations that I really appreciated. And, you know, pretty much any time I read a Chad Lutzke book, I think it's probably going to make my top 10 somewhere. So in at number 3, I have Shelter for the Damned by Mike Thorne. So kind of a funny story. As I mentioned with the Kyle Winkler interview, I shouldn't have jumped the gun and said, I'm gonna and gone to him on Twitter saying, you know what, I'm gonna read your book. How about you come on an interview on my channel? I'll interview you. I shouldn't have did that at the same time, because what if I didn't like the book? Well, Mike Thorne contacted me asking if he could be on the show. He wanted to talk about his collection, actually, Darkest Hours, which I didn't add any, as I said, I didn't add any collections or anthologies on this list, but Darkest Hours definitely would have made it, and his other collection, Hide and Seek, probably, well, I would have just picked one of them. But anyways, this book here is phenomenal. But he approached me, he's like, how about you read this collection, and then can I come on and can you interview me? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. And so I thought, I'd read more than just the collection. He had this Shelter for the Damned novella out as well, and so I thought I'd go and check that out as well. And it was the first thing I read, and I really didn't like the first chapter. I didn't like the characters. The writing seemed a little bit overly, I wouldn't say convoluted. I wouldn't say that at all, but I was confused as to who the characters were, and I didn't know why they were so mean to each other. It's just like a group of like 12-year-old kids, right? And I was like, oh no, what have I done? What if I don't like this author? I'm stuck reading 2 books I don't like, and then I have to talk to him. But thankfully, though, chapter 2 came along, and I absolutely loved the book from then on. So I got lucky with that one. I really need to read the book first before committing to any interviews that I do in the future. Unless I've talked to the writer before, and then I don't think it would be quite so terrible. All right. In at number 2 is Queen of Teeth by Hailey Piper, and this is where I kind of learned to do just that, because I started reading her books, and then halfway through reading, and I knew that I enjoyed Hailey Piper's writing. That's when I started hounding her. I was like, can you please come on my show? I really want to talk to you. And thankfully she said yes, and she came on the show, and we had an absolutely wonderful conversation, I thought. But Queen of Teeth, I would say, was my favorite of hers that I read this year. I've read like 3, maybe 4 of her books. Queen of Teeth really gave me like futuristic, it's got horror, it's got science fiction in it, it's got a little bit of comedy. Some people are calling it a comedy, but I honestly, I don't see it as a comedy. It's a little bit, I wouldn't say comedic, it's more, it's a little bit pulpy. And that's okay, in my discussions of this book throughout the year, I said that it kind of gave me feelings of like RoboCop versus Blade Runner, and it doesn't reflect those movies at all. Only an atmosphere does it, because you have like these secret police, you have like the government doing weird experiments on people, and one of them escaping. You could also say it reminds me a little bit of some 1980s Dean Koontz books in that regards. But it's fully its own. It's its own thing. Trying to compare it to stuff is my brain trying to make sense of what I just read, because it's crazy. And it's crazy in a great way. It'll be criminal in my mind if this book doesn't end up being a classic in the genre. And if it's not, it'll be because nobody knows where exactly to categorize this book. It's a crazy book, but it's very good crazy. I loved it. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants something a little bit out there. All right, in at my number 1. I don't know if you've guessed it. I haven't talked about it yet, and I you know what? Maybe it isn't as easy to guess as I had thought, because this is the book I think I've talked the least about, and yet it made my number 1. But it is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I absolutely love this book, because this book brought me back to my childhood and watching all those old slasher films. And I also really enjoyed the story. Stephen Graham Jones really did a masterful job at marrying all this information about old slasher films and putting him into his own story. That's a slasher story. It's just a wonderful joining of those two things, and I really kind of fell for the main character. She's victimized by her dad, and she's trying to work out some shit that any child in her situation would be trying to figure out. And there's these murders happening, and of course, because she's such a horror fan and a slasher movie fan, she's drawing parallels between these movies and real life, and she's trying to find the final girl to defeat the said killer. And it's just a wonderful yarn. It's a great story. It's written in a very literary type style, which is, if you've read Stephen Graham Jones, then you know what I'm talking about. And it's just a wonderful book. This is another book that needs to become a classic in the future. All right, so that is my wrap up for the year and my top 10 books that I read this year. I had the books that I did love, I really, really loved, and they'll probably be favorites of mine for the years to come. And keep your eyes for the lookout. Keep your eyes for the lookout. Does that even make sense? Look out for my next video, which is going to be 6 books that I didn't like this year. Thank you for watching, especially if you made it this far. If you made it this far, leave me a little vampire down there in the comments, and I'll leave you a vampire in return. Thank you for watching. Keep being safe and keep being creative. And I'll catch you guys in the next bookish video.